My parents cut me off and gave my sister everything. But when they betrayed me again, I changed their lives and then. Hi Reddit, I'm Marissa. I'm 36 years old and live in a restored colonial home I bought just under a year ago. It's in a historic district of Savannah, Georgia, tucked between moss-draped oaks and brick-lined streets. I travel often for work as a senior logistics consultant, managing international supply chains for some intense clients who think the world revolves around their deadlines. Between the flights, emails, and jet lag, the job's brutal, but the salary is high enough to make it worth the chaos. 6 months ago, after years of penny pinching and zero vacations, I finally bought the kind of home I've been dreaming about since college. It's got high ceilings, sweeping archways, and a wide veranda that creaks when it rains. The whole place smells like cedar and old paper, like someone bottled time and kept it behind the plaster walls. My friends were obsessed the moment they saw it. They've posted so many photos online that I've had random locals asking if my house was a set for some period drama. But there's something I've never told anyone outside my closest circle, my family, my parents, Gloria and Ralph, and my younger sister Tanya don't even know I live here. In fact, they don't know anything about my life anymore. We haven't spoken in nearly 2 decades. That silence started 17 years ago, back when I was 19 and about to start college. I'd earned a full academic scholarship to a top university in another state, and I was ecstatic. I thought my hard work had finally paid off. I also knew my parents had a college fund, roughly 45 grand, that was supposedly divided between me and Tanya. I figured I wouldn't need it for tuition anymore, but I'd still have to pay for books, housing, food, and transportation. I told them about the scholarship in our kitchen, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. My mom clapped and said it was wonderful, but her expression didn't match the tone. My dad leaned back in his chair and gave me one of those long, unreadable stares. Then he said something that changed my life forever. "Since your school is covering tuition, we're keeping the college fund for Tanya," he said, like it was some minor administrative update. I remember laughing, thinking it had to be a joke. But they weren't smiling. I reminded them that I still had to live somewhere and eat something. I pointed out that this money had always been for both of us. "You're smart," my dad said, his voice hard. "You'll figure it out. Tanya might not be so lucky." The betrayal hit like a truck. I called it exactly what it was: selfish and cruel. My mother slapped me before I even finished the sentence. Her palm cracked across my face so loudly it echoed in the kitchen. She told me not to dare accuse them of betrayal. My dad stood up and told me to pack my bags and leave immediately. I left that night with everything I could carry. Tanya peeked into my room once or twice while I was shoving clothes into garbage bags, but she didn't say a word. I stayed with my best friend Kara's parents, who took me in without hesitation. They gave me a room, fed me dinner, and never made me feel like a burden. I worked at a bakery and saved every cent I could before school started. The day I left for college, Kara's mom handed me an envelope with $3,000 in cash and a note that simply said, "We believe in you." Those words meant more than anything I'd ever heard from my own parents. I moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and worked 2 jobs while taking full course loads. While other students went home for holidays, I stayed behind and cleaned hotel bathrooms or stocked shelves at a 24-hour grocery store. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and cheap ramen, and I never stopped moving. Tanya sent a couple of holiday cards the first year, but I never replied. After a while, they stopped coming. The silence between us turned into something permanent. I graduated on time, joined a company that appreciated my hustle, and eventually worked my way into the 6-figure bracket. I traveled to Singapore, to Berlin, to Dubai, and even managed to climb out of student housing into my dream home. Life got better. I healed, or at least I thought I had, until 3 weeks ago, when the ghosts I thought I'd buried showed up uninvited on my front porch. It was a rainy Sunday morning, and I just made coffee when the doorbell rang. I opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor or a delivery. Instead, there they were: Gloria, Ralph, and Tanya, standing under my porch light like they hadn't disappeared from my life all those years ago. My mother smiled like she'd just dropped by for a friendly visit. My father looked around the porch like he was inspecting a new model home. Tanya, now 31, didn't even make eye contact, just stood there tapping her phone. I couldn't speak. My brain couldn't process what was happening. Well, Aren't you going to let us in? Gloria asked, already stepping inside without waiting for an answer. They just walked in like nothing had happened. Like the last 17 years had been some minor squabble over chores or holiday plans. I stood frozen as they roamed through my living room, complimenting the furniture, the architecture, the view from the window like they were guests at an open house. Gloria turned to me and said, "Why didn't you tell us you bought such a lovely place?" I finally found my voice and replied, "Because we haven't spoken in 17 years." She waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "Oh, that's all in the past now. We're here with good news." I asked how they found me. Apparently, they'd run into Kara's mom at the grocery store, and she'd told them, thinking she was helping reunite a family. Then Gloria beamed and said, "Tanya has something wonderful to share." Tanya finally looked up and announced, "I'm getting engaged." I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me thought they were here to reconnect, maybe invite me to the event. That feeling lasted all of 5 seconds. "We want to have the engagement party here," Gloria said, "in your house." And just like that, I realized nothing had changed at all. At first, I honestly thought I'd misheard them. I waited for the punchline, thinking this had to be some clumsy attempt at reconnection gone weird. But Tanya was already walking around my living room with a dreamy expression, talking about how perfect the space was for her engagement party. She kept saying things like, "It's just so elegant," and "This has the exact aesthetic we want." Then she dropped the bomb, "It would mean so much to have it here." I didn't say anything at first because I was too stunned to react. Gloria sat down on my sofa like she owned it, adjusted a cushion, and launched into the pitch. "Your house is such a gem, sweetheart. And since you're not exactly using it for anything major, this would be a great way to bring the family together again." I felt like I was being hypnotized by madness. Ralph, who had been silent, finally spoke, nodding toward the ceiling. "These old beams, the crown molding, this house was made for a celebration." I stood there in my own home, completely dumbfounded by the audacity of the people who had thrown me out as a teenager, now speaking to me like I owed them something. And not just anything, my space, my sanctuary, my home. I said no. My voice was clear, calm, and final. There was no yelling, no storming around. I simply said, "No, I'm not okay with that." Tanya looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't comprehend the word "no" coming out of my mouth. Gloria's smile tightened, and she leaned forward with that fake sweetness she used to use when I was little, and she was about to say something awful. "Marissa, I think you're holding on to a lot of unnecessary resentment. This is a chance to put things behind us and focus on what matters." Ralph added, "You've done well for yourself. Isn't it time to be generous?" That line almost made me laugh. They really thought I was going to roll over and offer up my house like a stage rental. Tanya stood up, brushing imaginary lint off her skirt, and said, "Well, that didn't go as planned." Then Gloria gave me one last look and said, "Just think about it, okay? Don't be vindictive. Family is family." They left shortly after, and I locked the door behind them as quickly as possible. But that wasn't the end, not even close. Over the next several days, I was bombarded with phone calls. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me. My Aunt Diane left a long voicemail about how excited the family was and how wonderful it would be to have the party at my place. She made it sound like it had already been decided. Everyone had the same script. Family is everything. Tanya deserves this day. Don't let old grudges ruin something beautiful. Some of the messages were more manipulative. One cousin said, "You're so successful now. Don't you think it's petty to hold back just because you're still hurt?" Still hurt? That was rich. I was being asked to provide a luxury venue, free of charge, for people who hadn't acknowledged my existence since I was 19. I stopped answering calls. I muted group chats. But the pressure kept coming. After a week of this exhausting campaign, I caved, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. I called Gloria and said, "Fine. You can have the party at my house. But I have conditions." I didn't get to list a single one. She squealed with delight and said she had to call Tanya right away. She hung up before I could even respond. That afternoon, Gloria and Tanya showed up at my house like they were on a winning game show. They didn't knock. They just walked right in, carrying color swatches, folders, and a tablet loaded with Pinterest boards. They were buzzing with energy, pointing at corners, rearranging my furniture mentally before even asking. We're thinking something early 20th century, Tanya said, spinning around like she was auditioning for a period film. Gloria chimed in. Candles, vintage lace, soft lighting, maybe a gramophone centerpiece, just magical. I tried to keep calm. I kept reminding myself that I'd allowed this. But with every passing hour, it became more and more apparent that they didn't see me as part of this plan. I was just the venue owner, nothing more. The worst part? They weren't even subtle. Every time they discussed seating charts or lighting, it was like I didn't exist. When I tried to speak, they just smiled and moved on. Tanya's fiancé Jordan came by once, polite but distant. His parents, Walt and Susan, seemed friendly enough, but even they acted like my house was some kind of event hall. Gloria asked if she could have a spare key, just to make things easier. I stared at her for a full 10 seconds before opening my drawer and handing one over. I had no idea why I did it. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was just the numbness of being railroaded. For the next 2 weeks, my home turned into a full-time event headquarters. I'd come home from work and find tables pushed aside, fabric samples spread across my kitchen, or strange cars in the driveway. My own bedroom started to feel like the only safe space left. I bought a long, emerald velvet gown for the party. If I had to endure this nightmare, I might as well look stunning while doing it. But I still felt like a stranger inside my own life. Then, one Thursday evening, I heard them downstairs while I was in my office trying to wrap up client emails. Their voices drifted up the stairs, casual and unfiltered. The photographer is confirmed for 6:30, Gloria said. Perfect, Tanya replied. And good thing Marissa won't be in the shots. I froze. My stomach turned. I muted my laptop and crept to the top of the staircase, listening. She said she didn't want to be part of the party anyway, Tanya continued. So we just didn't include her in the headcount. She's not even listed on the catering, Gloria added. And Jordan's parents are relieved. It keeps things clean and simple. I walked downstairs slowly, my mind racing. I stood in the doorway and said, I heard everything. Neither of them looked the least bit ashamed. Gloria shrugged. You weren't enthusiastic about the party, so we figured we'd spare you the discomfort. This is my house, I said, my voice cold but calm. The party is happening in my house. Tanya looked up and smiled like I was being silly. But you don't really want to be part of it, do you? It's better this way. You get a quiet evening, and we get the perfect setting. That was the moment I realized they hadn't changed, not even a little. They hadn't come to reconcile. They'd come to use me, just like they always had. And now, they wanted me erased from the picture entirely. I smiled at them, a big, exaggerated smile that must have looked unhinged. You know what? You're absolutely right. I shouldn't be at the party. I'll make plans to be somewhere else. Tanya clapped her hands, genuinely delighted. That's so mature of you, Marissa. I nodded. It really is. What I didn't say was this. They were right. I wasn't going to be at the party. But they were going to wish I had been. Because the party? It was about to go up in smoke. And I would make damn sure I wasn't the one left holding the matches. I went upstairs that evening with a tight smile still frozen on my face, closed my office door gently behind me, and sat down in front of my laptop with a quiet kind of fury boiling under my skin. There's a special kind of anger that comes when you realize people didn't just take advantage of you. They planned it, expected it, and smiled in your face while doing it. They hadn't just excluded me from my own home. They'd erased me from an event they were hosting in the very space I had built, paid for, and protected. I was supposed to be invisible, a helpful ghost who lent out their house and vanished quietly before the photos were taken. That night, I didn't cry, scream, or pace in circles. I planned. I pulled up hotel listings first, found a luxury spa resort just outside Asheville tucked beside a quiet lake, and booked myself a room for the weekend. Friday to Sunday, full suite, breakfast included. I wanted to wake up Saturday morning without the sound of my mother's voice echoing through my walls. Then I called a locksmith. I explained the situation as vaguely as possible, said I needed all exterior locks changed. Urgently, first thing Saturday morning. The man on the other end didn't ask many questions. He gave me a time, 8 a.m., and said he'd be there with new keys and fresh locks. Next, I called a cleaning crew. I told them I needed decorations removed from my home Saturday morning and placed neatly in my garage. Everything had to be cleared out before noon. No damage, no mess, no explanation needed. They confirmed the time, 9 sharp, and I hung up, feeling the kind of calm I hadn't experienced in weeks. That night, I slept better than I had since the day they walked back into my life. I wrote a letter on my nicest stationery, short and polite, explaining that the party had been canceled, all items were relocated, and any attempt to enter the property would be treated as trespassing. I taped it up by the door and went to bed with a plan locked in tight. Saturday morning came like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. I woke up before my alarm, packed my overnight bag, and brewed one last cup of coffee in my silent, sacred kitchen. The locksmith, a soft-spoken man named Everett, arrived on the dot. He worked quickly, efficiently, replacing every single lock on my doors. He gave me 3 new keys and said, "Whatever they were doing here, they're not getting back in now." The cleaning crew arrived next, a group of 4 fast-moving professionals who didn't blink when I pointed out the lace curtains, the antique candelabras, the pastel floral garlands, the mountains of plastic champagne flutes and boxes near the dining room. They cleared it all. Every trace of Gloria and Tanya's imagined celebration vanished into storage bins and canvas bags. By 10:30, my house looked like it had the day I bought it, clean, calm, untouched. I placed the letter on my door, tucked one spare key under a flower pot near the garage, and loaded my weekend bag into the back of my car. As I drove away, I didn't even glance in the rearview mirror. The resort was perfect. My room overlooked the lake, and the air smelled like pine needles and warm water. I ordered lunch through room service, took a long, hot bath, and curled up on a soft white couch with a novel I hadn't had time to finish in weeks. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime. No one could reach me, at least not in a way that mattered. At exactly 4 p.m., my phone began to light up. First, it was Gloria. I let it ring. Then Tanya. Then Ralph. Then Jordan. I turned my ringer off and poured myself a glass of wine. The texts started coming in a few minutes later. At first, they were confused. "Where's the key? The one you gave us doesn't work. Why can't we get in? The florist is here. The food delivery guy is asking where to set up. Please answer." By 4:30, things escalated. "Marissa, what the hell did you do? The guests are arriving. This is a disaster. You are seriously going to regret this." I let them stew. I sipped my wine and watched the sun dip behind the water. At 5 o'clock, I finally picked up one of Gloria's calls. Her voice was already raised, shrill with panic. "Marissa, you locked us out. The entire event is ruined." I took a deep breath, kept my voice steady. "I did exactly what you asked. I made other plans for myself. You didn't want me there, so I'm not." "You changed the locks," she screamed, her voice cracking. "There are people on the lawn. The catering truck left. Tanya is crying. I left a note," I said, my tone measured. "Everything's in the garage. The decorations are fine. The key is under the flower pot." "You are unbelievable," she spat. "You've embarrassed this entire family." I looked out at the lake, calm and unmoved. "No, Gloria. I refuse to be used. There's a difference." "We'll host it outside," Tanya shouted in the background. "We don't need the house. You step foot on my lawn, and I will call the police," I said, without raising my voice. There was silence on the line, just the sound of people talking in the background. I imagined the scene, dozens of overdressed guests standing around with nowhere to sit, melting appetizers, a furious bride-to-be with no backdrop for her Instagram story. "You've made a huge mistake," Gloria said, cold as stone. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "You're right. My mistake was ever letting you in." And then I ended the call, turned my phone off, and tossed it into my bag. The next morning, I called my elderly neighbor, Miss Alice, who always knew every bit of drama on our street. She answered like she'd been waiting for my call all weekend. "Oh, honey," she said with a laugh, "your mother and sister were losing their minds. They stood on your porch for almost an hour, shouting at each other and trying to explain things to arriving guests. I saw at least 3 people leave before they even got out of their cars." She paused, her voice full of amusement. "Then this big truck came and picked up a pile of boxes from your garage. Everyone left after that. They didn't even stay for cake." I thanked her, smiled into the phone, and finally exhaled. The weekend was mine again, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own life. I came home from the resort late Sunday afternoon, my shoulders loose for the first time in weeks, my mind clear, and the soft hum of lake air still echoing in my chest. The moment I pulled into my driveway, I could see evidence of what had happened in my absence. My lawn looked like it had hosted a flea market, footprints dug into the soil, flower petals scattered across the porch, and tire tracks carved into the edge of the sidewalk. There was something else too, bold red spray paint slashed across my garage door in shaky letters. Traitor. It wasn't elegant or smart. It was petty and angry, and it only confirmed that I'd made the exact right choice. I stood there for a moment just taking it in, then pulled into the driveway like I didn't have a care in the world. I had the garage door repainted the next morning. I hired a professional painter and told him exactly what color to use. Warm sandstone, the same shade it had always been. As he worked, he nodded toward the faint red outlines still visible under the primer and asked if someone was trying to make a statement. They tried, I said, but nobody reads graffiti on a locked door. The house was quiet again. My space felt like mine for the first time since Tanya and Gloria had bulldozed through it like they were auditioning for some reality show called Entitled and Uninvited. I lit a candle in the kitchen, played soft jazz in the background, and didn't answer a single phone call that entire day. By Wednesday, I got a call from my cousin Leo, who rarely got involved in anything and usually avoided drama like it was contagious. His voice was hesitant, but I could hear that familiar guilt sitting right behind it. He said, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. Gloria's telling everyone that you've been cut off permanently from the family. Tanya's calling it a betrayal of sisterhood." I nearly dropped my spoon into my cereal. I asked him if that meant I wouldn't be invited to the wedding. He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, that's the word going around." I couldn't help it. I started laughing, loud and uncontrollably, until I had to sit down at my kitchen island. I told him they could throw the whole wedding on the moon for all I cared, as long as they didn't bring it back to my doorstep. Leo didn't defend them. He just said, "I figured you'd want to know." Then, in a quieter voice, he added, "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." The next few weeks were blissfully uneventful. I buried myself in work, traveled to Toronto for a logistics conference, and even started planning a personal trip to the Scottish Highlands, a dream I'd postponed for far too long. I didn't think about Tanya or Gloria unless someone brought them up, and even then, it barely registered as a blip on my radar. But then something unexpected happened. One morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to answer. It was Jordan, Tanya's fiancé. His voice was tense, almost clipped, and he asked if I had time to meet for coffee. I told him I didn't see any reason for us to talk privately, but he insisted. "I just need 10 minutes," he said. "It's not what you think." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe a few blocks from my house. Jordan looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat across from me, cleared his throat, and without much of a preamble said, "I called off the engagement." I didn't say anything at first. I just raised an eyebrow and waited for him to continue. "I thought Tanya was just a little high-strung," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But after what happened at your house." I started digging deeper. Apparently, the house wasn't the only thing Tanya had misrepresented. Jordan had found out she'd applied for a joint wedding loan in both their names without telling him. She'd forged his digital signature and used fake email threads to justify it. The money hadn't been approved, but the bank flagged the application and called him to verify some details. That's when everything started to unravel. She was planning this giant, over-the-top wedding, he said, and she was trying to make it happen by any means necessary. I told him I wasn't surprised. I'd grown up watching Tanya get everything she wanted by crying, lying, or letting Gloria bulldoze whoever got in the way. "I owe you an apology," Jordan said, finally meeting my eyes. I should have seen it sooner. I thanked him for saying it, but told him I wasn't interested in holding grudges or having heart-to-hearts with my ex-future brother-in-law. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me. "She told everyone you locked us out because you're bitter. But I know now you were the only person who saw her clearly." He walked away, and I watched him go, wondering what kind of damage he'd narrowly escaped. That should have been the end of it. But Tanya wasn't the kind of person to leave things quiet for long. About a month after the failed engagement party, she reappeared online. She posted a thread on social media titled, "My Side of the Story," claiming she'd been emotionally manipulated by her family, forced to cancel her dream wedding, and betrayed by the one person she'd once admired the most, me. She told half-truths laced with pure fantasy. According to her version, I'd promised her the house for the party, then changed the locks out of jealousy. She described herself as the victim of a calculated act of cruelty, which she claimed caused emotional trauma and lasting damage. And because the internet is full of suckers with short attention spans, people believed her. For about 3 days. Then someone, I don't know who, dug up screenshots of her engagement fundraisers, her fake GoFundMe campaigns, and an online registry filled with luxury items she never told Jordan about. The backlash was immediate. Her carefully crafted narrative crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything I could have said. My house stayed quiet. My life stayed mine. And every day, I looked around at the space they tried to use as a prop and felt nothing but relief that I'd finally drawn a line. I thought the drama had finally burned itself out. I thought Tanya had exhausted every ounce of outrage she could generate, and that Gloria had found a new obsession to control. For the first time in months, I truly believed I was free of them. I went about my days in peace, doing things I had postponed for far too long, reading in the evenings, repainting the guest room, even hosting a small dinner party for close friends who made me feel seen and safe. Then, about 2 months after the online fallout, something completely unexpected happened. I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name and street, handwritten in Tanya's distinctive cursive, the kind she used on every birthday card back when we were kids. I stared at it for a few minutes before opening it. Inside was a folded sheet of white stationery and a photograph. The picture showed Tanya standing next to a man I didn't recognize, tall, dark hair, arms covered in tattoos, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Tanya was holding up her hand, showing off a ring that looked suspiciously like the one Jordan had bought her months earlier. The note simply said, "I hope you're finally happy now. I've moved on." His name's Damien. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement of the wedding that never happened, the lies, or the social media circus she'd orchestrated. Just an emotionally hollow declaration wrapped in passive aggression. For the first time, I felt more pity than anger. It wasn't real closure, but it was something, an ending she wanted me to see as triumphant, though the cracks were visible from a mile away. I threw the photo in a drawer and forgot about it, until Emma called me 5 weeks later, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Emma is my college roommate and the closest thing I have to a sister. She was the one who helped me get through the darkest days after I left home. So when she called me out of nowhere with that familiar cackle in her voice, I knew it had to be good. "Check your messages," she said between gasps. "I just sent you a screenshot." It was a post from Damien's public profile, which Emma had clearly found through an impressive rabbit hole of mutual connections. He had posted a long, melodramatic caption about freeing himself from toxic manipulative energies and finally choosing peace over performance. Tanya was nowhere in sight. All their photos together had been deleted. She hadn't moved on. She had just jumped into something else without dealing with any of her mess. And now, the same performance she tried to pull with me and Jordan was unraveling again, but this time, with a different audience. Emma couldn't stop laughing. She recycled the engagement ring, Marissa. The comments section is tearing her apart. People are asking where she keeps finding these guys and if she has a bulk subscription to wedding websites. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I felt something colder than either, clarity. Tanya hadn't changed because people like her don't evolve. They just keep shifting the set pieces, hoping the next stage will give them a different outcome. 3 days later, I got another envelope. Same handwriting. Same lack of return address. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a letter, an actual one. Tanya had written 2 full pages, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound angry or smug. She sounded desperate. She wrote about how everything had fallen apart, about how Gloria and Ralph had stopped speaking to her after Damien left, about how Gloria blamed her for the family's humiliation and Ralph had cut her off financially. Tanya had moved into a small apartment in a rough part of town, lost her job at a boutique for reputation reasons, and was trying to figure out what to do next. Then she wrote something I didn't expect. I know I hurt you. I don't know why I couldn't stop myself. I kept telling myself you had it all and didn't need anyone. I think part of me just wanted to win for once. I don't even know what that means anymore. She ended it with a request, not for money, not for help. She just wanted to talk. I sat with that letter for a long time. I reread it 5 times, trying to separate the sincerity from the strategy. I couldn't tell if she truly felt remorse or if this was just another version of the manipulation I'd seen since we were kids. I didn't answer right away. I needed to think. A week passed, then 2. No follow-up letter came. No surprise visit. Just silence. I started to wonder if maybe this time, the silence wasn't a weapon, but a consequence. Finally, I made a decision. I didn't write her back. I didn't text or email or call. Instead, I dropped her letter off at a local therapist's office, one I had gone to years earlier when I was still trying to make sense of my fractured family. I left a short note with it, addressed to Tanya, and asked them to forward it if she ever came in looking for help. The note said, "If you want to talk, start here. Then maybe we'll have something to talk about." I knew it wasn't what she expected. I also knew it was the only thing I could offer without compromising everything I'd built for myself. I wasn't going to let her back in just because she finally hit a wall. Sometimes people change when they're forced to confront their own damage. Sometimes they just get better at hiding it. I had no way of knowing which version of Tanya would show up if I opened that door again. So I didn't open it. Instead, I started focusing on something else, my next step. That fall, I was offered a chance to lead a new international division for my company, based in Amsterdam. It was the kind of opportunity most people only dream about, and it would mean leaving behind the house I'd fought so hard to protect. But I didn't hesitate. I sold the house to a young couple who loved every inch of it and promised to preserve its history. Before I left, I walked through the empty rooms one last time and said goodbye to each corner. Not out of grief, but gratitude. That house had held me together when everything else had tried to tear me apart. It gave me space, silence, and strength. But now it was time for someone else to have that sanctuary. I moved to Amsterdam in November. I now live in a loft with tall windows and cobblestone views, and I walk to work each day along canals that glimmer like silver in the morning light. I don't know what happened to Tanya after the letter. Maybe she followed through and found help. Maybe she didn't. I haven't heard from her since, and for the first time in my life, I'm okay with not knowing. Closure doesn't always come with a ribbon and a heartfelt reunion. Sometimes it's a silent moment at dawn when you realize you're finally free. And if she ever writes again, I'll know what to do. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I've finally started caring about myself more. That's the ending she didn't expect, but it's the one I needed.